You're watching the press row, and we're talking officiating. Everyone, or so it seems, everyone, is complaining about officiating in the NBA, in the playoffs. Major League Baseball umpires are using instant replay to figure out whether somebody hit a home run or not. Last night in Minneapolis, an umpire came up from AAA, and in the same inning, tossed out the catcher and manager from both teams. So the question before us, guys, is what is the worst officiated of the three major league sports? The NFL, the NBA, or Major League Baseball? Barry, let's start with you.
The NFL, and I don't think it's close. The NFL, I think, is so subjective, and so many games, I think, even more than the NBA. Doesn't seem like it would be, but I think more games turn on an NFL flag than any NBA whistle. Part of it's the rules, the pass interference is what mostly comes to mind. Roughing the quarterback, the protection of the quarterback is. They need to change some rules, and until they do, those guys are just going to be all over the place with the way they call games.
I think I agree that the NFL is probably the worst officiate. I think it's also the hardest to officiate. I mean, you've got just the space, even though obviously the officiating crew is bigger. As players have gotten bigger, faster, stronger, what they can do, how they can do it. I think all of those things, and then the just minutia of the rules that are out there. I mean, you see when it gets slowed down to as slow as it gets slowed down on instant replay, and you're still sitting there going, well, is his arm going forward? Is his arm not going forward? I mean, these guys are, it's really a tough sport to officiate. So it's probably the worst officiated, but I think they have reason to be worst officiated.
Well, I agree with both of you. I think it's NFL, but the degree of difficulty goes to the NBA. The NBA is impossible to officiate. I think the easiest thing to officiate is major leagues. And yet they screw up more. I'll tell you what, this guy needs to go back to AAA for rehab because his trigger is, they got to get he's too quick on the trigger. And here's the beauty of sport. The ump screws up, gets all the calls wrong, and you know what? You get tossed from the ballpark if you complain about it. He gets to stay and watch.
Unless you're umpiring a Chicago Cubs game and Carlos Zambrano tosses you.
That was pretty good too. But yeah, I think it's the NFL. But Jenny, I think the most impossible sport to officiate is the NBA.
You know what? And maybe if we got to sit for NFL games where we get to sit, and I don't mean that it's possible. I mean, if we could sit in the umpire's spot or the referee spot, we might see different. But even on the sidelines or on the inlines, you're not seeing the game the way we get to see the NBA games right where we sit. And I promise you, the NBA games are officiated magnificently.
Outstanding.
They get almost every call right. Yeah. I watch on TV, I get so mad, I think, they blew that call, they blew that call. But you see it live, and hardly ever do you see a call and say, no, they missed that one. They always get it right.
That's not what the popular impression is right now of these NBA playoffs. There's a lot of outrage, especially in the NBA cities, about how atrocious the officiating's been in the playoffs. Are you buying any of that?
I think what's atrocious is the behavior of the players. They can't let it go. Like I said,
primarily your Denver Nuggets.
Absolutely, the Thuggets is what they're being called, and they should be. And Nene got a tee. I mean, they're getting tees at the wrong times. Just remember what you're playing for. People do blow calls. Go on. Turn the page. I'm a lot more offended by the behavior of the players than the officiating. I really am.
I think a lot of people believe that there's sort of that star treatment out there in the NBA, and I'm sure that comes with the color of jersey you're rooting for. I mean, if you're a Nuggets fan, you think one thing. If you're a Cavs fan, you think another. I mean, I think it comes with who your star is. You always think the star treatment is going against you. I mean, people saw that here in Oklahoma City every time that a LeBron or a Kobe came through. Oh my gosh, they get every call, the first foul in the fourth quarter, stuff like that. So I think it's colored by what jersey your team wears. But yeah, I agree with Barry. When you watch it from a perspective that you're up close and you don't really have sort of a rooting interest, and it's really hard to sit there and say, well, that got blown, that got blown. I've never left an NBA game and thought, officiating cost a team the game.
And here's what needs to be thrown out. Any fan base has no credibility. I mean, if in Denver or Cleveland or Orlando, wherever they're at, saying the NBA officiating is bad, don't listen to them, because that's what fan bases do. I mean, we see that from OU football. I mean, they get beat 45-35 at Texas in Dallas last year. An excellent game, just a mano-mano game, and Texas won. And then for a week we hear about all the bad calls that went against OU. which is just ridiculous. Texas won that game, and these NBA games are being won by the teams that deserve to win.
We got to admit, though, the NBA rulebook, as it pertains to, especially to officiating, is something like the U.S. tax code. And when you have technical fouls being removed and reviewed, and you have a guy who reaches out and literally trips Kobe Bryant, I think there's problems in the NBA officiating that we can't gloss over.
There's problems with the players or the rules, Sherm.
Well, they're both.
I have a big problem with Dante Jones. I don't have a problem with what the ruling was.
If he didn't see it, if you don't see it, you don't see it.
That's true. Now, the problem is the undoing of rules. And the NBA just has all these flagrant 1, flagrant 2. There's too much extra layers to the code of officiating the NBA that complicates their job, which is already a difficult job. Jerry West has said this. The NBA court, we might need to look at expanding it because the players have gotten too big. So you've got all these guys pressed into this, and they're in shorts, and they're running up and down the court. They're playing up here. They're playing on the ground. And then, like you said, John, everybody works the officials in an NBA game. College basketball, you don't have players really talking to officials. I mean, there's 10 guys who are constantly working the officials. Then there's the coaches. Then there's Patrick Ewing. I mean, it just goes on, and it's almost, I think it's almost unofficiatable.
Well, in the court of public opinion, obviously, the NBA did itself no favors with the Tim Donaghy situation, and sort of the realization, I think, across the board that the NBA wasn't maybe looking at its officials as hard and clear as it should be. So I think you sort of have all these things stacked up. Is it still pretty well officiated? I think so. But then you start to add in some of these layers, and you can see why the criticism's out there.
What I find interesting about the refs is this. Most of them are unaffected by all that stuff you talk about the constant badgering and all that. In fact, I see a lot more showmanship from college officials than I do NBA. You don't see a lot of NBA refs hot dogging it.
Yeah.
In fact,
Joey Crawford, that's about it.
They generally laugh off, the knuckleheads of the NBA. I think they do a fantastic job.
You know what's interesting is, real quick, the Major League Baseball, the ump tosses them. NBA technicals, you add up to enough, he gets suspended. The people who gripe the most, how about Bob Stoops if he was a baseball coach? Would he get past the second inning? Or Mike Gundy? Now, I'm not saying Stoops is wrong when he argues. He's probably right about 98% of the time.
But those guys get out on the hash marks.
Yeah, I mean, Bob Stoops shouldn't have finished 50% of the games at OU. Am I right?
Well, I tell you, you got to say, they have the get-back rule, the get-back coach on the college football sidelines, and the guy who needs to get back isn't the player, it's the guy with the headset. And that's all for this segment. On the other side, we'll talk about high school sports in Oklahoma and who can bring peace in the valley.